This podcast is part of the Spoon Podcast Network, home of smart conversations that feed your mind.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Soul to Table. I am Chef Ryan Lacey, and today we have a innovative engineer, R&D specialist. He creates multiple products and most of all consults on some things that we don't even see coming in our food system. The intelligent, the insightful Louis Lebow. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for making time. It is always a gift to be able to get a guest, especially when we're so far apart. Please tell me, how are you? How's everything? How is this present time right now for you in the industry?
Well, I think it's an exciting time. I personally am doing really well. This morning I woke up and I saw a news article that mentioned fermentation. Huge investment is needed, but that people are working on it. And that made me thrilled. I woke up 4 a.m., saw that, went rowing, and now I'm here. But yeah, so I saw that. I was like, this is great. It means that people are still working on the important problems. Yesterday, I saw that Better Meat Co. signed a large contract, which made me thrilled, and they've received
Yes.
DoD funding. So these are all good things and things that have me excited about the future of food right here.
That I appreciate that insight. I also did see Meatco, that press release. We'll get into that in a little bit because there's so much to dive into with your insight. Can you share a bit about your journey from studying molecular biology and just stepping into food technology?
Yeah, well, I think like anybody's journey, it starts with sort of happenstance. My journey began in a lab, and I was a molecular biologist in my undergraduate. I was working on enzymes in Sweden in a lab working on type 2 biofuels, which are biofuels that are derived from trees instead of the typical corn or soy. Um, it was interesting work. It was good work, but I really wanted to be able to bring home the products that I was making, literally, and try them out instead of just seeing analytical data on my screen. And so I decided this is a perfect opportunity for me to go and study food technology. I went back to Sweden and finished a master's in food technology there. And that was a great adventure. It's the home, the university I went to is the home of Tetra Pak is right nearby. Oatly is around the corner. You've got Alpha Laval. So all these pretty massive food engineering and food brands right next door.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. I can't imagine the muse and just the environment, even on your off times, of just the network that you kind of come about, in casual comings and goings. So you worked across, companies big and small, from Starbucks to startups. What's the biggest differences in how innovation happens in those environments?
Well, I think it's a great segue. I mean, from Lund University, I was so fortunate that there are so many startups coming out of that university. There are startups that are working on all sorts of things. And one of the startups that I was fortunate to be a part of was working on potato protein, or at least use cases for that. And so I worked in a small team, was able to do that for a little while, moved to Finland, worked on another alternative meat company. And then I had the opportunity to work at a large national or international brand. And the difference between those, being at Starbucks versus at a small but publicly traded company, is just the fact that you not only you just have so many more work streams, you have so many more people working on products, versus the speed. You would think it might be different. It's not. It's always fast. It's always as soon as possible.
Yeah.
The excitement for the products is always high. The people that you see at home and in your surroundings are always asking, oh, well, what are you working on? And you still can't say, no matter what the size. um, but they were great companies to be a part of, and I was so fortunate.
That is really a gift. Did you pick up any good fluent German or any Dutch?
Well, so let's see. I was in Sweden and in Finland, and so there we would speak Swedish.
Oh,
And in
yeah,
Finland, you speak the national language are both Swedish and Finnish.
Finnish.
My Swedish is pretty okay, um, and then my Finnish is limited to "Mitä kuuluu," which means "How are you?"
Uh,
Um, Besides that, no. My people always thought that when I would speak Swedish, I would sound German, but I my German and my Dutch are quite limited.
that's awesome just to have that exposure. What kind of drew you specifically to product development in any early projects? What was kind of pivotal to stand out where you're like, this is where I want to be?
Well, like anything, it's an ongoing journey. And when we think about product development, for me, you think about taking a recipe from a kitchen and turning it into something that millions of people get to eat or experience at least. For me, that journey really took hold when I was in Lund University. Technically, Lund Tekniska Högskola is the Swedish name for it, or Lund Engineering Faculty of Engineering. But the real sort of, oh, I want to do product development. I was doing an internship at a microprotein company doing product development related things. And then I came back to school for that second year, and I led a team of 9 people, creating this pretty pertinent product at the time, which was a flexi burger. So 50% vegetables or legumes, 50% hamburger. You can do the math. It cuts the
Yeah,
emissions
yeah.
by a significant amount. We had a great time. I loved leading the team, and our product was a success. We created a video for it, which won an award. Um, but I just felt confident in that space. As we go forward and sort of based off of my background, process has always been key to me. And I think that some product developers are into a lot of process. Some product developers are more into the artistic side of product development and sort of that chef aspect. Some are more into ingredient technicalities. There's tons. Mine is an interest in process.
Yeah, that is crazy to just think of how many products you have probably come across, how many things that have never hit the shelves, and just how many moments of, research and development that have just gained you those 10,000 hours that we say, in any industry that you need. Can you describe your approach as to bringing products across the industry and just the insights of food and just really kind of unpack, what it means and explain it in simpler terms, for real world examples.
Yeah. Well, I think that like any person, you go to the grocery store and you look around and you might buy your staples, but if you're a product developer, you're definitely going to always add one thing to your cart that you did not need. Yesterday, I tried a new candy bar. Was it okay? Yeah, it was fine. Would I buy it again? I don't know. That's sort of product development in a gist. So there's plenty of products that you try out on the bench that are great. There's plenty of products that you try out on the bench that are terrible. Most are terrible. Um, so just like being a chef, when you've got flavors that work well together, you try that out. My background in product development is really a more technical background. Um, and so a lot of the things that I worked on were around texture and creating texture. The creation of texture is fascinating. It's what my master's thesis is on. But that leads to a ton of things that you're like, I'm not eating that today. But there are when it works, it's like, oh yeah, that's exciting. I'm really it's a high protein product that tastes delicious. Um, I think though, to distill your question down, what is the product development process, and that comes to, well, what does the consumer need? What addresses that need? What type of product? Is it a gel? Is it a juice? Is it an energy bar? For example, if we're thinking about a sports athlete that needs carbs on the run, they can't have something too dry. They can't have something too that sloshes around. So they might want a gel. And then you have to say, okay, out of all the recipes that are online, that I have friends that make, that are chefs, that I've tried in the grocery store, what things seem to be commonalities, what things need to be shifted. These are really sort of the starting points. And then how do we manufacture this? So you start to play around with the formula, you start to talk with co-packers, and then you start to think, okay, well, we need to also be able to package this, not just for 3-day shelf life, but for months. And you start to put all those pieces together, think about it, and then the last piece is, well, we have to market it. And the case study that's going around right now is Poppy. They called it Mother or something like that, and now it's
Yeah.
Poppy. A tiny brand to $1 billion brand. So marketing is just as important as all the product development. So I think it's really important that when you are designing a product, you're designing it and you're taking a holistic approach. And not only to, does this taste good? Not only is this nutritional? Not only is this manufacturable? Not only does this apply to the consumer, but can can our what we want to what the consumer needs, can they be addressed, and will they understand that their needs are being addressed in this product?
Man, like I said, you're just a walking gym when it comes to product development and really understanding the direct connection and correlation to the consumer. Um, those 10,000 hours I speak of. From that standpoint, molecular biology and food, I mean, in my mind, they're not so far apart, but for the average person, they are, two separate worlds. How did you find the unusual combination to manage those and then take that science background and have it shape the way that you approach innovation in food?
Yeah. Uh, if we go back to molecular biology, what we find is that we're really dealing with little factories, and that's always the approach that I've taken. Whether that's an ATP factory in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, as most people know in their high school class, or if we're dealing with a factory that's manufacturing cookies by the time. They're just very similar. There's processes, there's inputs, there's outputs. That's how you wrap your mind around it, at least for me. Luckily, as we continue, and really for the last several hundred years, microbes have been used in all sorts of food production, looking at cheese, looking at beer brewing, looking at just different ways that enzymes are tiny little proteins that are helping out, are changing and making the food that we love and eat today. So there's really a ton of overlap between molecular biology and food science, food technology. For me, it's a really exciting piece where the Venn diagram is starting to come together.
Yeah, you find the commonalities and the applicable, differences. And that is one of those things. I have a feeling, this is just my personal insight, but I have a feeling in the future you will, if not already, be a mentor to a whole new generation of science-driven foodies who understand the processes like you were saying. We don't think about it as we appreciate cheese, or we're having beer, or we're tasting a glass of wine. Those processes of fermentation, of distilling, of preservation, even with like salt curing things. They're so common nowadays, and we're so detached from them because we just grab it off the shelf or off the bench, as you say it, that brains like yours are going to be reignited in appreciation, especially in this new era of food. With all these transitions and working with all these brands, how do you collaborate between, scientists, chefs, and brands to just play it all out, and where do you see the gaps and opportunities?
Yeah. Well, when we bring together chefs, scientists, and brands, we we bring together three very different stakeholders that all want the same thing. They all want to create a good product. They all want to create a good experience for the consumer. How they go about it, very different.
Very
A
good.
chef, artistic, scientist, also really artistic, but have started to really apply a lot of formulas. But you do see those chefs that are, leading, cutting, or the fancy chefs in Alinea and places like that, that are formulaic, like a scientist would be. And then you have the brands, and the brands are really there to figure out what the need is, or to promote really what the innovation is. I find that chefs, and one of my old bosses was a chef, one of my old bosses was a scientist. They're different bosses. um, One, but the thing that's interesting is that the chef's mind is, okay, how do we create a minimum viable prototype? If we go back to my interest in human-centered design and engineering, um, you have to create that minimum viable prototype. What does the first take look like? And then the
Mm,
second, the scientists, they're, how do we scale this up? How do we have this every single time? Because you bite into an Oreo, you want it to taste like an Oreo. You don't want it to taste like something different. Um, and that's applies to Oreo, but it applies the same to a really nice, cheese. I like Kerrygold, so I want it to always taste like Kerrygold Dubliner. Um,
that's
but
a great one. Oh, it's a great
it's so
one.
good. A little melt on a bagel, delicious. And then you've got the brands, and the brands, they're really, in a way, they're sort of a quality controlled. So not only do they find the need in the market, but they're literally a branding. They represent all that hard work that the chef and the scientist did to get there, and so they have to be held and maintained. And bringing all those three stakeholders to the table and making sure that they're aligned, not an easy thing to do, but really worthwhile.
Yeah, that's hats off to you. I hope in the future that I end up in an endeavor where I am developing a product and I can bring such insightful innovation all to one table and roll out something beautiful.
I hope so too.
What is the common misconception that people have about product development in the food industry right now?
Well, I think that in the food industry right now, there's a big trend towards, there's always different trends, and one of the trends that has taken hold and sort of still is hold is the key, what is it, the ketone high, what is it,
Oh yeah,
keto diet. There we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
The keto diet, and that, that's a trend that my professors in molecular biology would say is probably not a very great trend. But there's tons of trends. Some of them are really exciting. I'm really excited to see all the new natural colors come out. Sit watching, see how big brands are able to adapt to that. But there are so many exciting trends. The alt protein trend is continues to somehow chug along, and then we see the whole trend with the probiotic sodas, and it's like, or prebiotic sodas, and it's like, okay, so we've seen one brand, two brands. How many brands can we go?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we'll see a few more trickle in. And it's very much reminds me of how I think like 2 or 3 years ago, we saw a trend of soda companies getting into the adult beverage space. And
Yep.
then adult beverage companies transitioning into the soda space, having non-alcoholics. I'm like, oh, okay. You just want more of the consumer dollar. I appreciate it. Appreciate your aspirations. With this buzzword that has been running around more and more for the last decade, sustainability. It's on the tip of everyone's tongue. It's on everyone's radar. How do you approach designing processes and products that balance innovation and environmental responsibility?
If we go back to where I sort of got my roots, which was in the alternative protein sector, I was fortunate enough to jump right in. Sustainability wasn't a question. It was that
Mm,
every action you did was inherently sustainable. Um, but that's not necessarily how I go about thinking about it. How I go about thinking about sustainability is, how do I design a process that is simple, straightforward, and creates a sustainable, long-lasting um, process that's good for you. So whenever you have innovation come across your um, workflow, you have an
mhm.
opportunity to create a sustainable option. What does that look like? Well, maybe it's swapping out, and you're making a cookie, and a typical cookie would be made with eggs. And you know what? You can make a cookie with a lot of different ingredients and have it still be delicious and chewy. And so I think Patagonia does a great job. I saw they had a product yesterday when I was in the store that I really want to try, which is a cheese cracker, sort of like a, what is that old? What are those old?
Like the Lunchables?
They're the little, like a Cheez It. It's almost like a Cheez It,
Oh,
you know?
oh, okay,
Yeah.
wow.
So it's a cheddar cheese cracker. And what I thought was interesting is I was reading the ingredient list, and that cheese was not mentioned at all. It was just cheese inspired. And I think that that's a great option. That's an innovative product that's building off of something. As long as they are delivering on the taste and flavor, and they've reduced the reliance on dairy, well, congratulations, you have a more sustainable product. But there are so many other ways of doing that. And a lot
Right.
of those sustainable options start in the manufacturing facility by figuring out, what do you do with your waste streams? How do you reduce your waste? And a lot of those result in cost savings for brands, which is sort of a win-win. And that's excites me. That's where I want to be.
Oh, that is a great explanation. I have seen more convergence on like aquafaba or what is that, nutritional yeast, which is probably what they were using in that cracker or something along
It
those
was.
lines. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Just for those umami tones. I'm nowhere deep into the food science as you are, but I am definitely a flavor chaser that loves some good gastronomy and just the nuances that come along with the changes of specialty diets and point of preference and price point for product production. Which is why I was instantly a fan of pursuing even having this conversation with you. Have you ever worked on a product that failed or just kind of didn't meet your expectations? And what did you take away from that process?
Well, the lab is very different from a manufacturing environment. And when you have something that goes right in the lab and you go to the manufacturing plant and you say, hey, can you help us scale this up? It's not going to work most of the time. So yeah, have I had things fail? Have I been given a product and had it have some quality issues? Yes. Then what do you do? Well, it's an opportunity to do exactly what you just said: innovate. And so that's where you bring in innovation. You figure out, okay, well, did we really need those three different ingredients? And there's always opportunities to reevaluate. And I think that versioning of food is a very tech thing to do. Version 2, version 3. I think we saw that with the Beyond Meat,
Hmm.
because consumers might see a package and they might think, well, there's nothing changed. It was terrible quality last time and it's going to be terrible quality this time. That's not always the case. Every opportunity, every run you get is an opportunity to enhance your formula. And so there's tons of innovation that can happen there.
Yeah, there are so many companies that I kind of watch, and I just watch them dial up the processes more and more. I'm here in California, so we come across a lot of plant-based alternatives, and even though I'm
Yeah.
not vegan, I still like to see who's, rolling out new things and who's made edits. It's just always very intriguing to me. Speaking of plant-based, you had mentioned the Flex Burger. But with that, what are plant-based and just alt protein products that are booming, or what excites you about the future of, food in the alternative protein space?
Well, I'll talk about my own personal life. When I wake up in the morning, one of the things I like to do is have a protein shake. It fills me up and it gets me out the door with a smile on my face.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's always, I mean, whey is so trendy and it's got all the amino acids and people love it. But for me, I figured that's a great time in my day to have a well balanced plant protein shake, and so that's exactly what I do. But there are so many areas where plant protein does play a role. Um, I'm really excited to try Impossible's new steak bites. I haven't tried them yet, but I can just see throwing those in a salad because the thing that's so nice about cooking with conventional, and by conventional I mean the last 100 years of
Mhm.
meat production, is that you just chop up a steak, you sear it up, you throw it in a salad, you throw it in a bowl, you throw it on your plate, and you've got something that's going to taste great and it's going to be somewhat nutritious. Now you introduce all these things like a pre sort of these steak bites. They're almost like I think they're it's like a pre-cooked steak piece. And then you just throw that on there. You've got a little bit of flavor. You know that it's going to be protein rich. Because I love a garbanzo bean as the next person does. But some days you just want to change up what's in your salad. And some days you want a steak salad with blue cheese. And I think that right there, a steak salad with blue cheese, you swap out the steak, but you still have the blue cheese. That's a really interesting thing, something that's trending in my generation, being as a lineal, as I like to say. Um,
Nice.
but what's trending is being a flexitarian, and that has gone in and out. The verbiage changes, but am I okay with cheese? Yes. Am I okay with red meat? It's a little bit more questionable. Personally, I'll eat it all, but I think that when we look at what making easy swaps easy, that is so exciting.
Yeah, that is something that I've caught myself doing as well, just being a flexitarian in this space.
Yeah, you
As a
almost catch yourself
millennial.
doing it. I think that's the exact verbiage. It's like, wait, I didn't have meat for 2 meals.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, maybe I don't need to have meat, a couple other times in the week. And I think that that's just such an exciting opportunity and something to share with those in your family and your community.
Yeah, and unless you're trying to be the next bodybuilder, you really can do well and just have more longevity and less inflammation on a flexitarian diet. Which more power to you, and just digestion in general. If you are repeating the same thing, your gut's gonna get tired of it, your palate gets tired of it, and your cholesterol is probably gonna go up. So, and your pocket too. Your pocket feels it as well. Um, where do you see the biggest opportunities in the next generation of food creators?
Well, I if we look at the earlier part of this conversation, I sort of alluded it to it in the first 5 minutes. I think fermentation is a key. I think that it's going to be a big unlock for our just food generation, the next generation of products. We're going to see a lot more fermentation. It's just a great way to manufacture goods. You take a simple thing like sugar, you introduce some microbes, whether that's a fungi or whatever, and all of a sudden you're starting to produce in a very simple manner, you're starting to produce really great value add products. A great example of this is um, there, there's a company, and I think we talked about it, Better Meat Co. They've got
Yeah.
they can take traditional agricultural feedstocks, feed them into their reactors, which is essentially a brewery, and then they get high protein mycelium, which is it's a mushroom like product, and it's delicious. It's neutral. It's got all that umami flavor of nutritional yeast, and it just needs a little bit of marinade and seasoning, and you're good to go. And I think that we're going to start to see more of that. There's going to be where we get our protein is always a question, but there are so many other things that are going to be on the horizon as well.
Yeah, definitely. And we see them coming as we look into the industry. I recently came across an article. I forgot the name of the company, but there's a company in the middle of research to be able to introduce um, fat burners and digestive assistants into foods. How do you feel about that innovation coming out? Basically, it would be a form of, the famous diabetes medication that everyone has, and some have been using for weight loss and for health reasons. That would be integrated into our highly processed foods.
Yeah, GLP integration. I I don't know enough about that space to really say anything on it, but any innovation, there's so many things that come up, and whether that resonates with the consumer is really the question. And so sometimes the consumer wants an innovation like that. Other times the consumer doesn't want an innovation. And sometimes the consumer really just wants a salad and they don't want any high tech food.
Yeah, you got to run with the strokes of the masses because that's where the money is. If you could collaborate with like any type of professional outside of the food world, whether it be artist, engineer, community leader, uh, who would it be and why?
Well, my personal interest is in robotics. I think that that's just fascinating. I don't know all that much, but I've always been interested in it. And that goes back to when I was in sixth grade and I made a little Lego Mindstorm run
Yeah.
around. Um, but robotics are so fascinating, and especially as we look to automation within the food industry, having locally produced goods, if that's something that regional trends require and necessitate, then you need to be able to have ways of having automation in those manufacturing plants. And robotics are just so intriguing, and I'd love to learn more about them. So being able to really hang out with a roboticist for a day and take them to different manufacturing plants and see where they see value add opportunities. I think that would be fascinating for me. And I'm sure I would come out of it with a lot of great ideas and a lot of, okay, I need to go and do this tomorrow.
Yeah, I could see that as you were speaking on this. In my mind, I'm like, oh crap, he can be a one-stop shop for manufacturing, for production. You would just have the logistics and you already have consumer insight. I'm like, wow, you would probably be the Swiss Army knife of product production for the food space. So anybody who comes across this, that is a product, development company that is looking to create something new, Lewis, that's a person you steal. Make sure make sure you pay him well. um, for the young people, inspiring culinarians who are listening to this, and just anyone who is intrigued by food innovation, what advice do you have to give them?
Well, I started really getting into the food space by listening to Adam Yee's My Food Job Rocks podcast, classic. Now on the Spoon Network, very excited.
Yeah,
Um, but I think that you need to understand what the job is. The job can always be different. There's a million different opportunities. Food is a ginormous industry, contrary to popular belief. and there's not that many people in it, and there's always a need for new talent. Um, and people have always got to eat. I think that a book that I would recommend is probably Harold McGee's On Food and Cooking, sort of the cult food science book of the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years, maybe longer, probably longer. But it's a great book. Um, and that's where I would start. There's so many ways to get involved. I'm involved in IFT, which stands for let's see if I can the acronyms always get me, but it's
Yeah.
the Institute of Food Technology. It's been around since the I think 30s, started in Chicago, but they also have student chapters. So a lot of the land grant universities have IFTSA, which is uh, student association versions, and I think that that's a great place to try out what would a career in food be like, because it's not just in the restaurants, it's not just in the labs. There's so many different spaces for you.
Man, thank you so much, Lewis. You know, how can listeners keep up with you? Whether it be, projects that you're working on or just kind of support you on the ventures or new horizons you're approaching.
Yeah. My LinkedIn is open and anybody can come in and connect with me there. And I think that that's the best place to reach out. Say hi, and then, you know, you can learn about what I'm working on.
That's excellent. Um, this is the mini segment that I do within each episode where I just have rapid fire questions, just a few because I am such a flavor chaser myself. So these are just a couple things that I love to ask people. If you wouldn't mind taking a few on.
Of course.
Awesome. Favorite ingredients to work with lately?
Mycoprotein.
Microprotein. Nice. Kitchen gadgets and kitchen tools that you will never live without.
Well, you only get two things to work with really when you're a chef. That's time. Well, I guess time, heat, time, and temperature. And so I always have a thermometer with me. Uh,
Hey.
yeah.
Dream dinner guest, dead or alive?
I would probably do Alton Brown. I mean, he's who I grew up
Woo!
watching, and you look into the fridge, and there he is. And I think that he's just got a unique perspective, at least when he came out with those shows.
Yeah, no, very much so. Always a fan. Uh, Last but not least, one food trend that you just wish was gone, 86 from the industry.
Well, we talked about keto diet earlier, and man, I'm sticking to it.
Copy that. Keto diet it is. Well, Lewis, you have been such a gracious guest. Thank you so much for joining us on Soul to Table. And please look out for Lewis, all his ventures. Check on the LinkedIn. And if you're ever curious and just want to get into the food space or just understand innovation a little bit more, you know where to find him. And this has been an episode of Soul to Table brought to you by The Spoon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.